Welcome to the Pump Fake. I'm Jarrett Bailey, USA Today, joined by my good friend, Matt Verderame, Sports Illustrated, Monday Morning Quarterback. Off day of your training camp tour, buddy. How's that been going?
It's been good. I'm trying to think now. What is today? Wednesday.
Wednesday.
Okay.
August 9th, all day, even if it rains.
I swear, man, I'm so off because my training camp tour started on Friday, so that felt like Monday. Anyway, it's been good. It's been good. Started with Chicago, went to Indy, then Cincinnati, up to Cleveland, and then yesterday a joint practice in Allen Park, Michigan, with the Lions and the Giants, which was excellent. A lot of fun to watch, and I can see coaches will tell you that they're more valuable than actual preseason games, and you can see why. It was great. It was also pretty cool. You had Saquon Barkley there, of course, with the Giants. And then also, by the way, Barry Sanders and Marshawn Lynch were just hanging out. So it was a who's who of running backs. But yeah, it was good. And if you want to see any of the stuff I've written, you can see it both on my feed and on Sports Illustrated's feed. I had a big feature go up to Lou Anarumo. Probably my favorite thing I wrote so far. So I would hope people check that out.
A lot of teams on that tour that can kind of go either way this season. And yeah. I've been at Steelers camp the past few days as well. So another team that's like, there's expectations with a lot of these. I will say, we talked a little bit yesterday about the Steelers. Now, I'll reiterate a few things that I saw, and we can kind of dive into a few things that you expect from them too. But, you've known me for a minute. I think you were one of the first people after the Steelers drafted Kenny Pickett to message me and were like, hey, man, good luck.
Yeah.
And
yep.
I was very openly not on board with that. In the last month of the season, though, I think that he showed that he has whatever you want to call that, that clutch gene or whatever with those 2 game-winning drives against the Raiders and Ravens. In camp, from what I've seen, it is a night and day difference with Kenny Pickett. And I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that he's going into this offseason, or he went into this offseason and into this camp knowing he's the guy. There's no quarterback controversy, trying to figure out, all right, is it going to be Mitch Trubisky? Is it going to be Kenny Pickett? How there's a few people were like, hey, maybe Mason Rudolph starts week 1 last year. And it was a time to be alive. But he looks poised. He looks confident. The offense is going to be hilarious. Like, I mean that in the best way, because everybody talking in Latrobe has been, or all the talks in Latrobe have been about Kendrick Green making the shift from starting center in 2020 to was inactive most of last season to now, he went into camp likely going to get cut to now like a cult hero as like this fullback H-back type.
Right.
And obviously the other mouths that they have to feed with Pickens and Johnson, Najee Harris, they upgrade the offensive line. I think the Steelers are going to be a lot of fun this year, man.
I think they have a real shot to make the playoffs. I mean, when you look at their schedule, look, the division's tough, right? I mean, you can make an argument that division, along with the AFC East, might be the best in football. But I'm going to bring it up here because I don't want to say things that are incorrect, obviously. But yeah. So if you look at their schedule, it really is not that bad at all. I mean, they open up the season with the Niners, which is a tough game, although it is in Pittsburgh.
Yeah.
Then you get the Browns. You're at the Raiders. That's a Sunday night. It's a winnable game. The Texans, that's probably the most winnable 2-game road trip of all time. Okay, the Raiders and Texans, if you're a playoff team, you're going 2-0 in those games.
I will say this though, for some reason historically they are bad against the Raiders, and I don't think they haven't won on the road against the Raiders since 1995. I think is what
which is wild. But they did beat them last year. I know it was in Pittsburgh.
They did.
But they did beat them, and that was with Carr and not Garoppolo. Look, let's put it this way: if the Steelers are going to make the playoffs, you got to win those games.
Yeah,
those first 2 games, you got a Monday night against Cleveland, week 2 at home. It's a game you should win. Raiders, Texans, home to Baltimore. That game's going to be what it is. It's always
that's going to be a 3-1, 3-2 start at worst for them.
Yeah, and then look at the Rams. I don't think the Rams are going to be particularly good. Some people do. I do not. Jacksonville at home, Titans at home. Listen, even if you split those, okay, fine. Titans you should beat at home. The Packers, you should win that game at home. Couple games on the road, Cleveland and Cincy. Back home to the Cardinals and the Patriots. They're at the Colts.
All of their toughest games are at home that aren't in division, which is a big helpful factor.
Yeah, I mean, look, I could easily come up with 10 wins for them, easily. So now, as far as the Pickett thing goes, and you've been at their camp, I have not been, so I'll defer to you. My concern with Pickett is twofold. One, he's 25 years old already.
Yeah.
He came out older. So he's got to catch up faster. Number
Mhm.
two, actually, I guess I should say I have three concerns. That's one. The other one is the concussions from last year.
Mhm.
Got to stay healthy. The third one is, so last year, he played in 13 games. He started 12 of them. He had 4 games where he threw for over 200 yards. And in those games, he threw in one game, he had 39 attempts for 244 yards. In
That
another
was
game,
against Buffalo.
that was against the Raiders.
Okay.
Against the Bengals, he had 42 attempts for 265 yards.
Yeah.
Against the Dolphins, he had 44 attempts for 257 yards, and he had 3 picks in that game. And against Buffalo, he had 52 attempts for 327 in a game they lost 38-3.
Not a recipe for winning.
No, but my point is this: he's going to have to be better at raising his yards per attempt.
Yeah.
They need now. Part of that's on the offense too. Matt Canada's got to put him in the position to do it. To me, if I'm Pittsburgh, my offense is not Najee Harris. My offense is George Pickens and Pat Freiermuth and Deontay Johnson, and then Harris. I'm not saying not to go to the man, but
Sure.
It's 2023 in the NFL. You're not winning by just pounding the ball into the line of scrimmage. You're just not. Your absolute best case scenario with that is just a bunch of really close games that you find a way to win, and then you get to the playoffs and you face an elite quarterback and get beat by
And get
30.
smoked. Yeah.
You have to be able to throw the ball. So for me, I actually think Pittsburgh has a very good chance to make the playoffs. But I think to actually be a threat in them, they need Pickett and Canada to be more aggressive and to raise that yards per attempt.
I would like to think that will happen, that they'll kind of let Kenny, they'll unleash him a little bit more. A lot of it last year, they put him on a leash. They weren't going to let him, unless that Miami game, they kind of needed it, especially in the fourth quarter where it was a low-scoring game and no team seemed to want to win that game. But yeah, it was a lot of just handoffs, dump-offs, running a lot of stick concepts. It was a very vanilla offense, which is Matt Canada in a nutshell for the past couple seasons.
Yep, you're right.
But with the talent that they have, the different things that they can do in terms of all the mouths that they have in this offense, I would like to think that they're smart enough to realize, like you pointed out, if they do get to the playoffs, all right, that's great. You're going to face Patrick Mahomes, Justin Herbert, Josh Allen. You're going to face probably Joe Burrow again, Lamar Jackson. You need a guy that you can ride in January. And we'll see if Pickett is that guy. But again, a lot of it too, he was thrown to the wolves middle of the season. The offense wasn't complex enough for him to be able to say, okay, let's do this and, throw the ball downfield. It's not to say that, he doesn't have the biggest arm, but we've seen guys prove you don't need a huge arm to be able to move the ball. Joe Burrow doesn't have the biggest arm in the world, but they can still get yards at whatever clip they decide to get them at. So I would like to think that after a full off season of getting more acquainted with the playbook, I'm sure Kenny wants to be a little bit more aggressive offensively too. I do think they're going to run the ball a lot, though. I know you mentioned that the offense can't be Najee Harris. I agree with you in the long term, and in the playoffs it can't be. I think bringing in, drafting Broderick Jones, bringing in Isaac Samalo from Philadelphia to put on that left side, they're going to look to run the ball a little bit more and not put everything on Kenny Pickett's plate. But there does need to be some more explosiveness and some pop to the offense. I don't think they're going to be a top 10 unit or anything like that, but I think that they can, hover around a middle of the pack offense with, the occasional explosive play per game.
They need them. They need explosive play, and they have the receivers to do it. You've got to be able to take advantage of that. This isn't 1995. You're not going to the Super Bowl with Neil O'Donnell, so he's going to have to throw the football.
Who did the Chargers have in the AFC title game year? Was it Stan Humphries and Neil O'Donnell there?
Yeah, that's something you'll never see again. Which, by the way, actually, it's a good segue because Kay Adams, who does a great job. She's been doing her camp tour, and I saw, I think today, maybe it was yesterday, was interviewing Brendan Staley, and they were talking about Herbert, and Kay's really high on Herbert, and rightfully so. He's incredibly talented.
It's great.
It made me think, because the Chargers always, I don't want to say they fascinate me, but they do, in the sense that I feel like every year we have to go through these motions of, hey, you know who's great? The Chargers. And then we get to week 9. I'm like, man, who's really disappointing this year? The Chargers. And I mentioned that Kay's at the camp because I think she does a great job to follow our show.
Yeah, she's great.
Couldn't meet a nicer person. I've had the pleasure of getting to know her a little bit. She's awesome. But secondly, she had this interview with Staley where he talked about taking a big leap and going for it. And like, to me, Herbert, I don't know if there has to be a big leap taken in terms of like what he does on the field. I mean, look, I'd like to see them throw the ball more down the field. They haven't under Lombardi. Lombardi's handcuffed him to no end, and now they have Kellen Moore in there. So in that regard, yeah. But like, I also think it's a fair commentary to sit here and say, like, I've seen many people, and Kay actually didn't even do this, but many people who are like, he's got to be in your top five. Like, does he really? Does he really have to be in my top five?
Talking about Herbert, right, as the top five quarterback?
Yeah, because I've seen a lot of people like with the rankings now. It's that time of year. I like to list them out. Like, this is your top five. And it's like, I don't like, is he in the top five? Like, does he have to be? You could certainly argue that he is. To me, there is no argument that he's better than Mahomes, Burrow, or Allen. There's not.
Oh, no.
I don't see. So now you're down to like the last two spots in this. I get the argument that he's better than Jalen Hurts based off of Hurts has had one spectacular year, and he's surrounded by incredible talent. But he's had one incredible year. Like, has Herbert had an incredible year? Like, what is Herbert?
Oh, my goodness. Yes, he has. 2021, he had, what was it, 38 touchdown passes that year?
Was that the year that they couldn't beat the Raiders to go to the playoffs?
Hey, I'm not saying at some point he has to have a little bit of help, does he not?
But see, this is the thing, right? Like, how much help does he need exactly to? I'm not saying to win a Super Bowl. I'm not saying that because like to win a Super Bowl, he needs a better coach and
yes.
But like to win a playoff game. How much help does the man need? I mean, he's got two elite receivers. He has a capable tight end in Everett. I'm not saying he's great, but he's solid.
Sure.
You have an all-pro center and an all-pro left tackle. You had for years, now not this year, but in recent years, you said Matt Filer, who's just a quality guard. You just put another first-round pick last year into Zion Johnson, who's a first-round guard. You extended Trey Pipkins, who I don't know that I would have done that, but they believe in him enough. Apparently, they've extended him. You defensively have Joey Bosa, Khalil Mack. Last couple of years, you had Drew Tranquil. You have Derwin James, Asante Samuel. Like, how much help do you need to win a game? Like, you're up 27-0 and +5 in a turnover ratio and lost. I'm not saying it's all on him. I think Staley is a bad head coach.
Yes.
I think that defense underachieves in big moments. So I'm not saying it's all on Herbert, but this notion that like he's just unassailable and he's great. Like, I can understand the argument he's going to take a leap with Kellen Moore and that you'll love him as a quarterback. Because by the way, I think he absolutely deserves to be in the conversation as a top five guy. But there seems to be this group thing that if he's not in your top five, you're just a dope. And like, is there an argument to be made you'd rather have Jalen Hurts?
You can make that argument, but let me counter everything that you just said. So you
also, last thing, would you argue could you argue you'd rather have Trevor Lawrence?
I would listen to that argument.
I'm going to tell you, I think I'd rather have Trevor Lawrence.
I absolutely hear that.
Okay.
Let me make the argument for Herbert, though. In his first 3 seasons, no quarterback or offense has scored more points than Justin Herbert has in his first 3 years. And I think that's pretty good. And that same 3-year span, the Chargers have allowed the most points. The Chargers defense has allowed the most points in any 3-year span. So you mentioned that they're underachieving. That's an understatement. And which is crazy because Brandon Staley's big thing is, defense. They allow like 9 yards a carry on defense. It's horrible.
You're not getting any argument there. He's just terrible.
And when it comes to Mike Evans, Keenan Allen, Rashawn Slater, all of them were hurt last year. Like at one point, his number one receiver was Josh Palmer. DeAndre Carter was his number one guy, I think, going into the San Francisco game. Like, they can't stay healthy. And that's not a new thing either. Like, you remember a few years ago when Tyrod Taylor had his lung punctured, and that's why.
Totally fair.
Yeah. So I think a lot of it is like, yes, on paper, every year we kind of do this thing where we drink the Chargers Kool-Aid because on paper they should be good. And then something like the JC Jackson thing, they make a big splash and sign him last year. He misses practically all of last season with the ankle. Joey Bosa has missed time in years past. Khalil Mack. Like, there's a bunch of guys who they bring in that we say, oh my goodness, the Chargers, they're really like, they were on the cusp last year, but now they're really, and something inevitably always happens. If they can stay healthy, then yeah, I would definitely listen to like, oh man, is Justin Herbert underachieving? And even now I would listen to it. You're up 27-0. I understand that Brandon Staley, you got to win that game. So you can put a lot of that on Herbert too, but a lot of it I think is look at Joe Lombardi's play calling in the second half of that game. It wasn't good.
Well,
so
his play calling just in general. But listen, your points are all correct and well taken. Like they had a lot of injuries last year. Like last year, Slater missed most of the year. Yeah. Herbert himself was hurt for a good.
Yeah, I mean he's playing with that
the rib injury. Right. Yeah, no question. And listen, the point is not that he's not a great player. He's a great player. Otherwise, he wouldn't be in the conversation in my eyes for the top 5. Mm-hmm. My point is there's this weird, almost like appointment of him as like, well, he's an elite quarterback like everybody else. And you're like, he's an elite talent. Like he reminds me a lot of Matthew Stafford in terms of the way we talk about him. So like Matthew Stafford in Detroit for years on end was surrounded by talent, and the Ndamukong Suhs and the Calvin Johnsons and the Nick Fairleys and the Reggie Bushes. But like it never felt like they put it together for one reason or another. I think that's a fair comparison to the Chargers, who are talented, and the Lions made the playoffs a couple of years, but they never really felt like a team that realized who it could have been, right? Yeah. Maybe it was the coaching, maybe it was injuries, which I think is totally fair. But with Stafford, there was always this push of like, well, he's great. It's like, well, he's incredibly talented, but he also contributes at times. Like most of the time he's great, but at times he contributes to the problem because he throws a bad pick or he makes a play here that he shouldn't.
Yeah, I mean, the year that the Rams won the Super Bowl, I think he threw like 17 picks.
Yeah, he threw a ton of interceptions. Now look, the Rams go to the Super Bowl, and to his credit, he plays really well in the Super Bowl. Mm-hmm. Okay, and especially at the end of the game, and they win, and deservedly so. He's a Super Bowl champion. And I think the conversation about his career is going to be very awkward when he walks away, because you're going to have some people who are like, he won a Super Bowl, he should be in the Hall of Fame. Like, no, I probably shouldn't be, man. Honestly, and this genuinely surprised me. I actually looked this up the other day. Do you know how many Pro Bowls he's been in?
Matt Stafford, I'll say 5.
1.
Really?
He's been to 1 Pro Bowl in his career.
That is very.
And I was shocked by that. Like I thought I would have been with you. I would have said like 4 or 5. Okay. But my point is, Stafford for a long time either was on bad teams, which okay, not his fault, or like teams that were pretty good that like really never did anything for one reason or the other. Maybe it was on him some years, maybe it wasn't, but like they didn't win, they underachieved. And with Herbert, Mahomes is a 2-time Super Bowl champion, but nobody's comparing it to Mahomes. So like put that aside. Burrow's gone to 2 AFC title games the last 2 years, and he's gone, and by the way, with you and me as his tackles, okay?
Yeah.
And has gone to 2 AFC title games and a Super Bowl and was damn near winning one.
And was within a ball hair of going to consecutive Super Bowls, if not for a bad penalty taken by his defense to put the Chiefs in field goal position.
Okay. Allen has won a bunch of playoff games. Okay. Now, you could argue Allen's had more support than Burrow or Mahomes in some ways because he's always had a really good defense around him and he's a dig. But like, Allen has won a bunch of games. Okay. He is unassailably there. He's an all-pro the whole day. Yeah. I know Hurts is surrounded by a lot of talent. There are a lot of guys in the NFL surrounded by a lot of talent. Now, maybe not to the extent Philadelphia gives, okay, but he was awesome. And was in the MVP conversation, second team All-Pro. Lawrence has no defense to speak of.
This is true.
Was coached by Urban Meyer as a rookie. And that team not only went to the playoffs, won a game, and then like actually gave a decent account of themselves in Kansas City.
Yeah.
My problem is not that Herbert is considered a great talent. He is an incredible talent. I love watching him play. My contention is, though, the 2 biggest games of his career, Raiders Week 18, Jacksonville game. In that Raiders game, he was extremely mediocre for 3 quarters, then went into God mode for the 4th quarter to his credit. It was unbelievable. But then they go to overtime. The people forget this. The Raiders get the ball and drive all the way down the field, and then in typical classic Raiders fashion, get stopped at the 5-yard line, have to kick a field goal, right? So if Herbert goes down and they score a touchdown, they win the game. Max Crosby's the only guy in that defense worth a damn. And the Chargers just cannot score a touchdown, right? And then eventually lose. And then we all know what happened at Jacksonville playoff game. It's not all on Herbert, but my thing is like, why is never any of it on Herbert?
That's a very fair point. I'll give you that.
It's always like, well, it's Staley, it's the injury. And yet, look, it 100% is those things as well. But it's never given to Herbert. Like, if Josh Allen blew a 27-0 lead and had a +5 turnover ratio in the game, people would be like, choked. Can you imagine if Mahomes did that? Like, Mahomes has 2 Super Bowl rings, and when they blew that lead to Cincinnati, and rightfully so, he got crushed for that game. And he deserved to get crushed for it. If Burrow lost that game, if Lamar Jackson did that, if Lamar Jackson blew a 27-0 lead, he'd be crucified till the end of time. Herbert does it, and it's like, well, it's not his fault. It is kind of his fault. Like,
I feel like Herbert and Lamar are kind of in the same class, though, where if you say anything negative about one of them, that means you hate them. Or if you it's one extreme or the other. I feel like him and Lamar are kind of in the same boats when it comes to that.
No, there's truth in that, because with Lamar, it's either like you've got to absolutely love him and there's never anything wrong, or you are like the biggest critic of him in the world.
I don't know how they're going to be this year, man, to be honest with you.
I don't either, because I don't know if their defense is good.
And I don't know what this Monken system's going to look like with Lamar Jackson. Like, that's not to say that I'm not going to be one of those dopes that says, oh, he's a running back. No, like he's gotten marginally better.
No, but it's a whole new system.
Yes.
And it's new receivers. And we were just talking about guys who get injured.
You can't stay healthy. Yeah.
Beckham gets hurt. Bateman gets hurt. You've got a new rookie receiver who's on the smaller side in Zay Flowers. Maybe he's great. Maybe he's not. We'll see. Yeah. But yeah, no, it's a real – I mean, look, they're one of those teams, like, they have a lot of variance to them. They could go 13-4 and be unbelievable, and you'd be like, okay, yeah, sure. They could also go 8-9, and you could go, yeah, well, you know what? As it turns out, Beckham and Bateman got hurt, and it took half the season to get used to a new scheme, and the defense wasn't nearly as good with all the guys they lost. And you're sitting there going, yeah, you know what? It might be time to kind of rebuild this team. So I agree. And again, it's a division where you look at it and go, well, anybody could make the playoffs out of that division. And I don't see the Bengals missing the playoffs, but anybody could miss it, like outside of Cincinnati. So it's a very interesting division. I think it's going to be a very tightly contested division.
NFC North is going to be tight too. And you visited the Bears, you visited the Lions. The more I think about the Packers, the more they kind of fascinate me. Like, defensively, they're going to be awesome. And it's just going to come down to how good is Jordan Love going to be. And we're seeing a bunch of clips of him throwing, sidearm between 2 defenders during training camp, scrimmage drills and whatnot. And I try not to invest too much into that, but at the same time, if he's fine, I think that they're going to be, if not a playoff team, they're going to be in the hunt all year.
Yeah, the Packers are really interesting. They're going to be the last stop on my tour. I saw them in OTAs, and I'm not going to sit here and draw a big conclusion out of one OTA practice with Jordan Love. Like, that's stupid. He struggled that day, but they also did a lot of red zone stuff. Like, the practice was kind of designed for the offense to have a tough day. Matt LaFleur in that presser that day, though, did say, he's like, look, the offense is going to be a work in progress all year long. Like, we know that. My concern with the defense is this. I'm with you in the sense they're really talented. Like, the defense has a lot of guys on it. I love Rashawn Gary. He's now back. Jair Alexander. Awesome. Yeah, right. I mean, you're right. Kenny Clark, on and on. They're really talented. My concern is that their system and their scheme has been a mess over the last couple of years, right? Like, that's kind of been, if you talk to people who follow the Packers, who cover the Packers, stuff like that, like, one of the biggest things has been, you know what? Joe Barry gets a lot of criticism, and I think it's justified. Like, when you watch them, they're very simplistic in the way they play, and they're very rigid in the way they play. Obviously, people who watch this, I'm sure know, I'm a Chiefs fan, grew up a Chiefs fan. Like, I remember before Steve Spagnuolo, they had Bob Sutton as a defensive coordinator. Bob Sutton would sit in cover 2, man under. I'm not kidding. Every play. Every single play. And just say, that's fine. So we're going to play defense. I remember charting a game once when I worked for SB Nation. They asked me to do a film study. I might be a couple snaps off on this. They played the Raiders. It was a Sunday night game, or it was a primetime, a Thursday night game.
Is this like Matt Castle era Chiefs?
No, this was Alex Smith.
Okay.
And this game, I believe, was the game. Somebody could fact check this, but I'm pretty sure this is correct. It was they were playing the Raiders, who hadn't won a game that year. They were like 0-10. It was like Carr's rookie season. It was a Thursday night game in Oakland, and the Chiefs lost the game. and it kept them from the playoffs. That was the year Seattle and New England played in the Super Bowl. The Chiefs beat both of them and didn't make the playoffs because they lost to like an 0-10 Raiders team. But in any event, I bring it up because I remember charting the game, and there was something like 73 or 75 snaps in the game. The Chiefs did not run a twist or a stunt the entire game. Just 4 guys straight up. I think they blitzed like twice. They just sat in the same defense the entire game. And they would do that week in and week out. I mean, all the way up to Mahomes' first year as a starter when he won MVP. That's what they did. And so it got to a point where, like, the Chiefs back then were really talented on defense. They had Justin Houston, Tom Lee, Brandon Flowers, Eric Berry, Derek Johnson, Don Terry Poe. They couldn't win big games. They couldn't get off the field in big games because everybody knew what they were going to do defensively. In fact, against your Steelers, they had a notorious play in Kansas City in a playoff game where Justin Houston was on Antonio Brown for 3 It was just, you're like, they're never winning a Super Bowl like this. This is insane. Yeah. I feel like Joe Barry, it's a similar issue. Like, it's just, they're not coached well enough defensively. And that's my concern with the Packers defense.
I believe Xavier Grimble caught a touchdown pass that game. If I'm not mistaken. I'll have to go back and look.
I blocked that out. I don't know. No, he didn't. You know, I know he didn't because it's the only game in NFL history, at least.
Was that the 6 field goal game?
Yep.
All right.
The team didn't score a touchdown and beat a team that scored 2 touchdowns.
That's fantastic.
It was not that. It was. I was in deep emotional. Actually, it wasn't in this sense. That was the game that convinced the Chiefs to draft the quarterback.
There you go. See,
so in that way, it was fantastic.
Mike Tomlin did Chiefs fans a forever universal favor that day.
Yes, he did.
What a guy in Mike Tomlin. All right, buddy. I know you've got a busy day ahead of you. I'll let you get out of here. What do you want to plug anything for what you got coming on SI?
Let's check out Sports Illustrated. I've got a feature up right now on Lou Anarumo, the Bengals D coordinator. It was a lot of fun to write that. Lou's a great guy and a phenomenal coordinator. I have a feature up also on, I guess I'm running around with defensive coordinator features. I have Jim Schwartz. That one's not so much about Schwartz as much as it's about the Browns kind of revamping their defense. The Anarumo one's actually about Anarumo. Those are up. I have camp reports up for every single team that I saw, which was 6 teams in 5 days. You can check those. You can check out my Twitter feed, check out SI, whatever you want to do. But yeah, there's plenty more coming. On Sunday, I'm at Vikings practice. Tuesday, I'm in Kansas City. So, and then a little bit after that, I'll be in Green Bay. So I got 3 more stops, and then I'm staffing the Chiefs Lions opener at Arrowhead. So it's a busy time, but it's a great time.
It is a great time. All right, buddy. I'll let you get out of here. I'm gonna run through my top 10 and make people go read my power rankings on USA Today. But I'll talk to you soon.
Take care, man.
All right, buddy. Matt Verderame, Sports Illustrated. And so yes, I did just say. I'll be doing power rankings on USA Today this year, which is awesome. And to give you a little bit of a taste, to give you a little bit of a reason to go read them, I'll give you my top 10, and then you can go over to USA Today and read 32-1. All your favorite teams. You can come at me on Twitter or X, whatever it's called now. You can yell at me for ranking your team lower than they should be in your eyes. So 10-1, this is what it sits at right now. And then we'll get out of here and tease some stuff for the coming week as we get back into the swing of things here on the show, doing weekly episodes going into the NFL season. So number 10, I put Miami at number 10. That might seem a little bit low to people. I think not having Jalen Ramsey until December at the earliest, that's going to hurt them a little bit. I do love the potential of their defense, though, with Vic Fangio, especially their front four with Wilkins and Zach Sealer, Jalen Phillips, and Bradley Chubb. Fangio isn't a guy who blitzes a lot, so they're going to rely on those 4 guys to win, and they do it very well. Wilkins and Sealer were the top 2 in the NFL in win rate last year. So I like what I see from that perspective. It just comes down to offensively, what are the Dolphins going to do when teams counter their offense? Because if you look at the Chargers game last year, the 49ers game last year, it seems like, there's a blueprint to figure them out. How are they going to counterpunch that? They're still going to be, it would shock me if they're, bad. But this is a deep AFC. They're going to be competing for a playoff spot. The offense, as long as everybody stays healthy, it's still going to be explosive. But I would like to see what happens when, a little bit of adversity comes their way. So Dolphins are number 10. Number 9, hey, we already talked about the Chargers. I feel like, I even wrote in the column, I feel like I'm going to regret this. Because every year we all drink the Chargers Kool-Aid. And every year it seems to come back to bite me. I'm doing it again simply because of Justin Herbert. All the things I just pointed out in the conversation with Matt. Most points in a 3-year span, but the defense has allowed the most points in a 3-year span. I'm surprised that Brandon Staley retained his job. They made Joe Lombardi kind of the scapegoat, which, hey, they needed to move on from Joe Lombardi regardless. Kellen Moore, I think, will open up the offense a little bit. He is more of, an intermediate offense guy similar to Lombardi, but his is more north and south rather than east and west, focusing on the sidelines like Lombardi did. So the Chargers are number 9. They need to stay healthy. That's their biggest thing. If everybody stays healthy, they should be a playoff team. With that quarterback, if they miss the playoffs this year, there's a lot of questions. Obviously, Staley's going to be gone, but there's going to be a lot of figuring out to do. But the Chargers are number 9 very hesitantly. Number 8, the New York Jets. They went 7-10 last year with a tackling dummy at quarterback and Mike White and the Cougar alum, Cougar hunter, Zach Wilson. That defense is very good. Adding Aaron Rodgers with Garrett Wilson, nice collection of running backs, solid offensive line. Weapons are pretty solid all around. There's not too many holes on this team. They do play in a tougher division. But when you add a 4-time MVP who just signed an extension showing that he's there for at least a few years, knowing that he's still got football left in him, I think it was a change of scenery was needed for Aaron Rodgers. And I think that it's going to pay dividends. I think the Jets are going to be a playoff team. A little bit hesitant on that end too, because it still is the Jets. But with all that talent, it's hard to bet against them getting in to the playoffs. Number 7, I'm going to be higher than most on the Steelers this year, so get used to that. They're number 7 in my inaugural power rankings. And look, if you want to say that's a little bit high, whatever, that's fine. Everything that I've seen from their camp, man, I think they're going to be really good. I don't see a unit on their team, maybe nickel cornerback, because that's their biggest question right now. They're going between guys like Shannon Sullivan, who came over from Minnesota, who wasn't good last year. Elijah Riley has really impressed at camp. It looks like it's going to be his job to lose at that nickel spot. So everywhere else, man, their offense has a ton of weapons. Their offensive line got better. They got 3 All-Pros on the defensive side of the ball and a lot of young talent. Like, it's a very healthy balance of really good veterans and young talent that has a lot of potential and is really athletic. I've been on record saying that my hot take of the year is that the Steelers winning the AFC North. I'm sticking with that. That doesn't necessarily mean I think that they're better than a team that's going to be ranked above them in the division, but they have an easier road to get there than that team. So Steelers are number 7. The Jaguars are number 6. If there is an easier bet on who's going to win their division, I don't know it, because I think Jacksonville is the lock for the AFC South. The Colts aren't going to be there. The Texans probably aren't going to be there. And the Titans are trying to convince themselves that they're still playoff contenders, but they're not. Trevor Lawrence is my pick to win MVP this year. And you add Calvin Ridley, Christian Kirk in the slot, Evan Ingram doing the things that he does, Etienne and Agnew. The only thing that really concerns me is their secondary. Andre Sisco is really good, but they don't really have, an apex guy in the secondary. But the offense, man, they're going to score a lot of points. Doug Peterson, we know how good of an offensive play caller and play designer he is. And I think that adding Ridley to the mix, they could be a sneaky pick to not only be the number 1 seed in the AFC, they can make it to the Super Bowl if their offense is that good. So the Jacksonville Jaguars are number 6. Number 5, the 49ers. I reserve my top 4 spots for teams whose quarterbacks I can trust. And I trust everything else with the 49ers, but I can't trust their quarterback. I don't know who it's going to be. Is it going to be Brock Purdy? Is it going to be Trey Lance? Hell, is it going to be Sam Darnold? Because I feel like Sam Darnold's going to play at some point this season. Everything else on the roster is great. They just added Javon Hargrave to a really good defense. Now they got Javon Hargrave, Eric Armstead, Nick Bosa on the same defensive line. I think their secondary, guys like Galmador Lenore are going to take the next step. Hufanga is a really good safety. Fred Warner's the best off-ball linebacker in football. And their offense at the skill positions are basically the NFC Pro Bowl team. I love everything about the 49ers except their quarterback. And it feels like Kyle Shanahan and John Lynch need to be the smartest guys in the room because they can't seem to figure this thing out. Everything else about the 49ers says they should be a Super Bowl team, but until they find a guy under center to do it, I'm not going to pick them to get there. Number 4, the Buffalo Bills. Last year was supposed to be Buffalo's year. Like, the Chiefs were going through what we thought would be, a transitional year, and they ended up winning the Super Bowl. But a lot of their lack of depth was exposed against Cincinnati. Their offensive line wasn't good down the stretch, and their pass rush was non-existent once Von Miller went down. They were going up against backup linemen for the Bengals, and they just couldn't get to Joe Burrow. So I don't want to hear anybody say, oh, but Greg Rousseau and AJ Epinesa, they're not predominant pass rushers. They need somebody else. That's why they went out and got Leonard Floyd. We'll find out when they get Von Miller back during the season. They're still talented on that side of the ball outside of the pass rush when Von Miller, comes back. Matt Milano's really good. I think he's the second best off-ball linebacker in football. Trey White, they need to see something more from Kyer Elam. But Micah Hyde and Jordan Poyer are both back. It's a really good safety duo, maybe the best in football. And then offensively, you bring in a guy like Dalton Kincaid to be, that big slot number 2 option guy. And their offensive line got better through the draft. So Buffalo is expected to still be in the mix, but a Super Bowl needs to come soon, or people are going to start rumbling about, okay, is Sean McDermott really the guy? Do they need to find somebody else? Last year was supposed to be their year. They went through a lot of stuff, especially the DeMar Hamlin incident, but we'll see what comes from Buffalo this year. I expect them to still be in it. Buffalo is number 4. The Philadelphia Eagles are number 3. We talked about it with Matt. Jalen Hurts had a really good year, and they're still really talented. Yes, they lost Hargrave. Yes, they lost C.J. Gardner-Johnson. They bring in Terrell Edmonds from Pittsburgh. He was a really underrated signing, and then they drafted half of the Georgia Bulldogs football roster to make up for the loss of Hargrave. They bring in Jalen Carter and Kobe Dean, Kelly Ringo in secondary. Like, they got a bunch of really talented guys in the draft. Running back-wise, they lose Miles Sanders. They bring in DeAndre Swift, Rashad Penny. A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith are still going to do their thing. Dallas Goedert's a really good tight end, and they still have the best offensive line in football. Eagles are still going to be right in it. They are the best team in the NFC until proven otherwise. Number 2, the Cincinnati Bengals. The loss of Jesse Bates and Von Bell does concern me a little bit, but at the same time, I don't want to say safety is not important, because obviously it is, but if they lost Trey Hendrickson and DJ Reader, I'd be a hell of a lot more concerned. But they still have Trey Hendrickson. They gave him an extension. They still have DJ Reader, Jermaine Pratt. Those are their 3 big dogs on the defensive side of the ball. We saw Cam Taylor-Britt took a really big step forward last year. Dax Hill at safety, they took him in the first round a few years ago, and they expect him to be, if you take a guy in the first round, you expect him to be ready when his number's called upon. He's going to be in that starting role this year. Not offensively, we know what they're going to be. We'll see how much time, if any, regular season time that Joe Burrow misses, but it's going to be the Burrow, Chase, and Higgins show offensively. They just need to find good offensive linemen to keep him. One, they need to stay healthy on the offensive line, and they need to be able to keep him upright throughout the season, because again, the offensive line was inconsistent as hell last year. But regardless, if all goes well for the Bengals, then they're going to be right back in the mix and potentially going to another Super Bowl. And then we know who number 1 is, the Kansas City Chiefs. They have Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes, and you don't. Losing Eric Bieniemy at offensive coordinator, we'll see how much of a difference that makes. But really, the engine that runs this machine is Mahomes, Reed, the offensive line. They need to get Chris Jones back, because if they lose Chris Jones, then their chances of making it back to the Super Bowl go down drastically. He's their second most important player, I would argue. But hey, they brought in more weapons. They draft Rashee Rice out of SMU. Travis Kelce's still there. Kadarius Toney, a full year in the system. We're going to see how he plays this season. Kansas City's still the best team in football. Even if they're not the deepest team in football, as long as they've got 15, and as long as they got Andy Reid, they're going to be a threat to win it. They've been to 3 Super Bowls with those guys. They've won 2 of them. Would not shock me whatsoever if they repeated this year. So that is my top 10. Again, go read 32-1 power rankings on USA Today. Really excited to do that all year on USA Today. It's going to be a lot of fun. Go read the Steelers stuff too, Behind the Steel Curtain. I'm the deputy editor of that site too. So my plate is full for the NFL season, and I'm excited to bring you guys all the content that I can, especially here on the Pump Fake. We do weekly episodes again. Like I tweeted out, it's been a little bit of a hiatus just because I felt like everything that could be said about the offseason about every team has kind of been said, and settling into these new roles. Now we're, tomorrow kicks off week 1 of official preseason action. We got Texans Patriots to kick it off tomorrow at 7 Eastern on NFL Network. And then we're right back in the flow of things. We are, a month away from week 1, Thursday Night Football, Chiefs Lions. So we're back, everybody. And it's really good to be back. I know how much the offseason tended to go by slower as I was younger, but the last 2 off seasons kind of flown. This one really flew for me. I don't know about you guys, but it's always good to, be around this time of year with a lot of excitement. Everybody has expectations at this point in the year. Even if it's not Super Bowl expectations, even if you're a team, that's probably on the cusp of a playoff berth or might not make it, still young talents that you're excited to see the direction of the franchise. And that's why this time of year is so fun. But a month away from officially kicking off week 1, a month away tomorrow, I should say, Chiefs, Lions, and then we got preseason action throughout the weekend that kicks off tomorrow with Houston and New England at 7. And there's another game at 10. I should have brought that up. Let's see what that game is. But regardless, the Pump Fake is back weekly, part of the Believe Podcast Network. Listen wherever you get your podcasts. Watch me on YouTube. All that fun stuff. Appreciate you guys tuning in. I always appreciate my buddy Matt Verderame for tuning in as well. This has been the Pump Fake. We'll see you next week. Keep up with all the stuff on USA Today and SB Nation. In the meantime, all my written stuff, you can tweet at me or X at me, Z at me, whatever it's called now, at J Bailey NFL on the app formerly known as Twitter. And yeah, the machine is back rolling, everybody. NFL season is up and running, and it's going to be a fun one. Keep it up. Keep up with me throughout the entire season at J Bailey NFL. We'll see you next week on the Pump Fake.